talk about behaviour, hopefully in a way that's useful, relevant, not just in a classroom setting, but maybe in other places too.
Are you going to introduce yourself, are you?
Yes.
Oh, good. All right.
Bit about myself.
What a cute husband.
Yes, his son. So yeah, I'm William Haynes' daughter-in-law, married to Robert Haynes. That's my 2-year-old cutie called Lottie. And I did something called Teach First. I don't know is that a thing in France? No. It's a charity that started in America kind of and then came to the UK, aimed at reducing the gap between, basically to eliminate educational disadvantage, because traditionally students that are more well off, have more money, go to private school, they are more successful in life, live 7 years longer compared to students from a low income family that go to a state school and do whatever, statistics say their chances in life are greatly reduced. And so Teach First was set up to try and bridge that gap, to reduce that gap. And so it's kind of designed to train teachers and throw them into very challenging inner city schools that have a very high percentage of children that come from a low income background or lots of high ethnic diversity, that kind of environment. So that's the school that I work in is Greenford High School, is that type of school. It's basically in a place called Southall. If you know London at all, that's Little India for London. And so we have a very mixed diversity of students, but with lots of different backgrounds, economically and everything. I'm a chemistry teacher or science teacher, so I teach secondary school from 12 to 18, but specialise in chemistry for A-level. And yeah, I've said about Lottie, she's 2 and she's, that was a couple of days ago with her Easter It's. So my kind of training when I started teaching was obviously looking at all of the teaching aspects, but one area that I was particularly worried about was behaviour. I knew it would be something I would struggle with because I'm not naturally a very strict person, I guess, and it was my biggest worry. The best advice, not the best, but the most common advice that I was given at the time when I was training was don't smile until Christmas. So don't show any sign of weakness. They know that you're a new teacher, so be really strict, be harsh, don't smile, don't give anything until Christmas. Now, whether that's the best advice or not, I don't know. Some stories from my first year of teaching, I was trying to teach adult cell cloning, and we did a practical with eggs, so you could see the nucleus moving. And then 2 weeks later, I found some eggs in my cupboards because the students had thrown them in the cupboards, which obviously stank up the whole room. I had, obviously when you're training, you have observations, so people come to watch you teach and give you feedback. And one observation was with a Year 11 class, very challenging Year 11 class that did something called BTEC, which is a more vocational course, so not for the academics. And these students, basically, they're not getting good grades. They're probably the worst behaved in the school. So I was terrified, and one of the kids ended up starting to play basketball in the middle of my observation. Needless to say, that was not a fun lesson. Glue on the ceiling seems to be a fun game for some of the kids around school. So there was one class I had where at the end of the lesson I'd always have to check my ceiling because they would cut the tops of the glue sticks off and then flick them up with rulers. And our ceilings are quite high, they're probably higher than this, and then you get little patches of glue on the ceiling. The best situation I had was a boy that was refusing to do work. He didn't want to do any work, and he said he just wanted to put his head on the table, and I was obviously trying to get him to work, and then he put some glue on his forehead and stuck his head to the table. And that was an interesting one. Had another girl who threw a firecracker in one of my lessons, and when I spoke to her parents afterwards, thinking the parents would be on my side and would tell off their daughter, they went into a whole discussion about, well, my people need to show their freedom, and she's just trying to express her freedom. And I was like, oh, I've got no support here. So yeah, there's been some interesting situations. The things, as well as don't smile until Christmas, the things that were drilled into me were seating plans and having rules that everyone could see stuck into the children's books that they signed and I signed, so we both agreed on these rules that I then could enforce. Making sure I learnt names quickly so that I could tell people off and phone parents. And actually, one thing that maybe I'll come back to again later, relationships, so building relationships with the students, which at the beginning when you start teaching, doesn't mean anything because you don't know these kids and how you meant to build a relationship while you're teaching. But that is one of the things we'll come back to. So what I wanted to do, just to go down the route of visualization again, is give you a scenario. This is scenario A. So girl called Sammy in year 11. You are now the teacher in this room. You are trying to teach this class about adaptations or something biology related. And this girl starts taking out her mirror and her makeup and doing her eyes while you are talking to the whole class. So A, number one, do you confiscate, so take away the mascara, and then shout at her, kick her out the room, making sure that everyone else sees you are being strict and you're not standing for this? Do you keep teaching, because everyone else is quite concentrated, everyone's listening, so you don't want to disrupt the flow, so you keep teaching, and just model the fact that everyone else has got good behaviour and you keep going? Or do you stop talking and give them something to do and then go and talk to this girl privately and figure out why she's doing her makeup in the middle of your lesson? So talk to the person next to you, decide which one you would do if you were a teacher. 30 seconds. 30 seconds, pick which one. Okay, 5. Round it up in 4. In 3. Finish conversations in 2. And 1. So, show me on your fingers, 1, 2, or 3. Which one would you go for? So 1, confiscate the mascara, kick her out. 2, keep teaching, kind of ignore the bad behavior. 3, set the class on a task. Which number would you choose if you were leading this class?
2.5.
2.5. 2. Okay, so you've got 2s and 3s. No one's going for 1. Interesting. Okay, cool. All right, we'll come back to this, but different scenario in the meantime. Lego gun. So in chemistry, we try and teach about chemical reactions. So you have reactants, and then they break their bonds and then react together, make new bonds and make new products. So to kind of demonstrate this, sometimes we use Lego. That you start with something and then you break them apart and then make something new. So I had a class with the Lego, with a worksheet guiding them through what they should do and then answering some questions on the worksheet. In the middle of this, a boy decides to make a gun out of Lego and then start shooting his friend across the room with his pretend Lego gun behind textbooks and things like that. So would you, if you were the teacher here, would you put his name on the board and just keep teaching? So you're talking, you're teaching, and then just put name on the board. Name on the board means this is like a punishment. Or number 2, would you shout at him for disrupting the class because it's not the first time that he's disrupted the class? Or number 3, would you take away the Lego from the whole class because they can't be trusted with Lego? 30 seconds with the person next to you.
No.
But when he is doing that, everybody is looking him.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that one seems a bit harder. Okay, you're going to have to make a decision in 10. Make a decision in 5, 4, 3, 2, and again on your fingers, which one would you decide?
None.
You can pick. 1, 2, 1, 2. Oh, we've got 1, 3. We've got 1, 3. Okay, lots of 2s actually. Okay, cool. Last one. This is just interesting. Okay, the snort. So, there is a new girl in your class who dropped down from top set. So she used to be in one of the best classes, and then they rearranged some of the classes, and she is now in your class, which is not the top set. It's mixed ability, generally lower ability. She is quite arrogant, likes to answer questions quickly and pretend she knows everything more than everyone else, and is upset that she's in this class. And she is very loud, so she will talk very loudly, but also when she laughs, often she snorts. So,
What is it?
snort, like,
Oh, I see.
yeah. So the children in the class don't like her because, you know, she's a bit arrogant and annoying, and when she snorts, they make fun of her and they imitate her snorting. So on this particular occasion, she has snorted again, and various children in the room start copying her and start snorting. What do? Number 1, you keep the whole class behind because they're kind of all involved, and give them a short lecture about bullying, it's wrong, how you're making her feel. Number 2, you ignore the situation and try and change the topic and move on quickly so that it doesn't turn into a big thing. Number 3, you find a quiet time to talk to the girl, but also try and pick out the key people that are starting the snorting and talk to them as well. Last 30 seconds with the person next to you, what do you think? Oh, this one's easy. Oh, okay, good. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Make a decision. Oh, we're pretty unanimous on this. Almost unanimous. Most people are saying 3. We've got 1-1. Interesting. Okay, so I'm not gonna. There's not a particularly right or wrong here. What I want to do with you actually throughout this talk is kind of go on a bit of a quest to find techniques or ways of doing things that might be more useful. So seeing your ideas is probably more useful to me than it is to you, to be honest, but I want to work through them together with you. I'll tell you what I did, and it probably isn't the right thing, but I'll also give you a bit of context about the students. So this girl, what I actually did in the situation was I was talking and then I told her off. I'm not sure I shouted, but I definitely told her off, took her mascara and sent her outside. Later on, I found out from other people that her dad was in prison, her mum had mental health issues, and she had a kind of anger issue herself, so she would often talk back and retaliate, obviously because of what she was going on. So was that the right course of action that I did? Maybe not. At the time, I was trying to make it clear because I was a bit shaky ground with the whole class anyway. I wanted the whole class to know that I didn't stand for that. That was not acceptable. So, yeah, that was that situation. The Lego gun, this was a very, I think, what I did at this one was shout at him for disrupting the class a third time. He was a constant disruption. And actually, he had something called SEMH. Anyway, that's a label that you get saying that he had certain mental health issues himself. So he was always very attention-seeking and had a very low level of concentration. He also really struggled with work. So the task that I'd set them on to try and do this worksheet and follow instructions on how to make Lego, he just saw it as an opportunity to play because he didn't want to, or he didn't know how to get started with the instruction. So for him, it was, a way out for trying to not feel stupid. Instead of feeling stupid in the class while everyone else gets on with it, he could play around and make jokes and be the cool kid. So yeah, that wasn't necessarily the best course of action. And then this last one, I already told you her background. Turns out that some of the key instigators also she had very low self-esteem for being dropped down. So she was in the clever class and now she's in the stupid class. So she felt insecure in herself and wanted to, I guess, prove that she knew all the answers and, feel like she was not fazed by any of the other students, even though she knew the other students didn't like her. Turns out the other students are also very threatened by her because they are not the smartest students, and so she made them feel insecure. So in this situation, I kind of did the third one and took her and this other boy, who were kind of the key people, and had something called a restorative conversation, where you try to get both sides to say the things that they'd done to each other and draw a line and move on. Did it work? Well, not really, because afterwards the boy, who had a very low self-confidence in himself anyway, he got excluded from school. So that kind of resolved it, but not in the way that I'd hoped, because he ended up disappearing, which is a whole nother story. But
How
that
did we pitch it to a stupid group?
they're not a stupid group, but they have challenges. Like I said, this boy in particular, his sister died that year, his mother was getting remarried, and he was just interested in basketball, so he wasn't interested in science. And that, together with the fact that he felt threatened by this girl, meant that he was always misbehaving. So he's not necessarily stupid. And for him in particular, it was a case of he was difficult the whole year, but I had to constantly tell him that I knew he could do better, and I knew he had potential, and I knew he was capable, and that I believed in him. And only towards the end of the year, unfortunately, did he then actually start being more, trying harder, trying to learn better. His grades were going up. But then, anyway, he got excluded for a whole other reason, which is another challenge that I'm not going to go into now. So I'm going to go down the styles thing a little bit as well. We were talking about different parenting styles. This is also kind of parenting styles. This one is called authoritarian, and when you put it in the context of teaching, I see it as the very strict teacher that does not allow for any misbehavior. You have a silent classroom, all the students are writing, either you're dictating or you've got something on the board, they're copying it down, they're all working very hard, very quietly, very independently, and if there's any bad behavior, name goes on the wall, there is no room for misbehavior, right? So that's the kind of authoritarian classroom.
Totalitarian, I would say.
Maybe totalitarian, yeah. Then there's the permissive, which is the kind of other style, very loud room, could be very engaged, so there's lots of group work, lots of talking, lots of discussion, very exciting. In the case of science, lots of practicals, lots of people doing things with chemicals, and they are talking about the work, but the room might be very loud, or they might be kind of disruptive, but not necessarily in a bad way. But you are focusing on praising the positive. You're not really wanting to make a big thing about the misbehavior. So that's that kind of side, the other opposite side. There are four. Uninvolved isn't really so relevant to teaching, because if you're an uninvolved teacher, then I don't think that works. You're just not in the room. Authoritarian, permissive, we spoke about. I suppose authoritative is a little bit more in the middle, where you are strict with the rules, you won't allow rules to be broken, but you are more interested in creating a positive relationship, a positive atmosphere, conversation, respect towards each other. But there's more fluidity, there's a bit more creativity, there's more engagement. It's not just teacher talking down at the students, it's more a conversation. So for me, that's kind of, I suppose I was trying to find the middle ground. Like I said, my tendency is maybe more to go towards permissive, because I feel like I'll give you another chance. It's okay, I know you messed up, but I won't give you a detention this time. I tried to be not try to be, but my nature is to be the kind teacher, which is not necessarily the best, because then you just get taken advantage of. Interestingly, my school changed their behaviour policy partway through. So when I was teaching in the beginning, you had consequence 1, consequence 2, consequence 3, and then you're out. And you wrote the names on the board. It was very clear, very black and white. And you did detentions, phone calls home. That's the kind of strategies that we used. And then even if it didn't work with you, then you got sent to the head of department or the head of year, so to kind of escalate. A couple years ago, my school changed their whole behaviour policy based on something called pivotal. Sorry, it's a little bit cut off. So now we use caution, yellow card, red card. Same idea, a bit like, I'm telling you, I'm warning you, you're talking, you shouldn't be talking. Okay, now you're talking again, that's a yellow card. And now, you've thrown a rubber across the table, you're on a red card, now you go. So same idea, but no names on the board. So no humiliation in that sense. Very more private. I have a little note in my book or on my table where no one else can see it. But instead, I focus on the positive. I put your name on the board because you've done some great work. I phone home for you because you've been getting good grades. So much more focusing on the white instead of the single black bad behavior dot. You focus on the whole class, which is mostly good, if you think about it. Even in a difficult class, most of the students want to learn, most of the students are doing well. There's always only just that black little dot in the middle of bad behavior. So instead of focusing that, you kind of ignore it and work more with the rest of the page. So PIP and RIP stands for praise in public, so the good names on the board, phoning good positive phone calls home, and RIP, reprimand in private. So, you've been doing something bad, class gets on with something, I'll come over and have a word with you and I'll say, you're on a caution now because you were talking when I was talking. That's the new policy. And teachers struggled with this. I've also struggled with this. I suppose any change is a struggle. But yeah, and later on I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are on it. Because there's, I suppose, pros and cons. The idea is nice that you don't humiliate, you don't punish publicly, but you encourage more the positive, right? So as an idea, it sounds good, but we'll see some of the issues. The other place that I've been getting ideas from, because as I said, I've got a 2-year-old, and they come with their own challenges, is this book, which is How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen. Because of course kids don't like to listen, they like to do their own thing. And really interestingly in here, I thought it would say, naughty corner and, consequences, take away the sweets or take away the TV. But they were saying that punishment doesn't actually teach anything. So punishment doesn't tell them that they shouldn't do something necessarily, it just causes a resentment. But equally, they say praise needs to be done very carefully. So instead of just praising the positive and saying, oh, good girl, you tidied up after yourself, or you didn't throw the food on the floor, they're saying labels like good girl can easily be kind of wiped out as soon as they've done something bad and they're now bad girl. So instead of giving those kind of praises, it's suggesting more to use descriptions. So I'll give some examples. I think this might make it a bit clearer. So they're saying describe what you see instead. Describe the effect on others, describe the effort, describe the progress. So for example, I'll give you examples from my daughter, Lottie. If she threw some food on the floor, instead of saying, don't do that, you shouldn't throw food on the floor, bad girl. Instead of saying that, I should say, I see food on the floor, is it supposed to be on the floor? Describe the effect on others, like Mama now has to clean this up, so it's made me upset. Or describe the effort. So she's, trying to eat properly with a fork or something, then I can say, I can see you're putting a lot of good effort into using your cutlery and there's no food on the floor. Describe progress, and I can say, last week you were struggling to use your fork, but now you're managing to use your fork by yourself, so they can kind of see their development. Not using terms like good girl, not comparing. I think probably we all know that as an instinct anyway is a bad idea to say, oh, why are you doing that? Your brother never did that. I don't know if any of you heard that phrase when you were growing up, or, why are you doing that? Look at your friend, she's behaving so politely, why aren't you more like her? That kind of comparison. And even saying something like, I'm proud of you, to be careful of when you say it. So we should just generally be proud of our kids, not only when they're doing something good. So, oh, you've done an amazing drawing, I'm proud of you. Then in their heads they think, okay, she's proud of me when I do a drawing. What about if I've, dropped something? Suddenly I'm not, she's not proud of me anymore. So this was a bit of a surprise to me, but it comes from someone, if you're studying education, which many of you might be soon or are in the process of, someone called Carol Dweck, who looks at something called growth mindset. So it's the idea that often we have this, like we were talking about stupid children, right? This idea that either you're stupid or you're smart, and if you're good at maths, then great, you're good at maths, but if you're not, then tough. Like, I'm just bad at maths, I can't do anything about it. That would be called a fixed mindset. And Carol Dweck says there's no such thing as a fixed mindset. Well, it's a mindset, but there's no such thing as being good at maths and bad at maths. Everyone can get good at maths. It's just about the effort you put in and being prepared to fail and try again and keep going, perseverance and all of those kind of other skills. So she says, instead of praising, you got that question right, well done, fantastic answer, she says to praise the effort instead. So from a classroom perspective, it's more about you've been working really hard for the last 20 minutes. Doesn't matter whether you got the questions right or not, but you've been working really hard, and that's what you're praising. So it's a very different kind of perspective on praise, and I think it's very difficult to do. Like, especially with my 2-year-old daughter, when I see her do something good, I want to say, oh, that's amazing, well done. But I'm trying to train myself to praise her more when she's working hard. Like, she spent about half an hour trying to do a puzzle with me. And it's not that she managed to do the puzzle particularly, because I did most of it, but she was concentrated for a whole half an hour. So trying to praise the fact that she was so focused for such a long time. I guess in theory that then gives more stamina and more endurance and more perseverance to go through and not worry about failure, but to keep going. Whereas if you're only praising correct answers or success, then you kind of build up a fear towards failure and a fear towards getting the wrong answer. And that's obviously not a good learning environment. So yeah, some funny because I wasn't reading this for my students, I was reading this for my daughter, but I mean, naturally, I guess it crosses over, that they're connected. Some other ideas, just because, anyway, I think she comes up with good ideas. To be playful. So this is obviously aimed at young kids, but some of the ideas can relate to older children as well. But of course, whether you're going to be teaching older children or have your own kids, hopefully, anyway, this might be useful. So to be playful, instead of saying, oh, we have to go to the car now, to be more creative and think, okay, well, how can we go to the car? Maybe we can pretend to be dinosaurs and growl as we go to the car, or, making it more exciting. Offer a choice. So we have to, in a classroom, for example, we have to get this worksheet done, but you can either, do this side first or that side first. I don't know, giving some kind of choice that makes them feel they are more in charge, putting the child in charge, so giving them giving the responsibility to come up with a solution. So, okay, Lottie, you made a mess on the floor. What can we do now? How can we make this better? And then she kind of naturally says, oh, well, let's get a baby wipe and clean it up. And then she wants to help me clean it. Give information. So again, the food on the floor. Well, food doesn't belong on the floor. Where does the food belong? It belongs on the plate. So it's not a judgment or a judgmental kind of act. It's more a fact. These are the rules. This is how it should be. So what do we do? Using one word. So instead of giving a lecture and saying, well, life isn't fair, you need to grow up and get on with your homework, just saying, okay, homework needs to be done, Describe what you see. So again, more descriptive rather than personal attack kind of thing. It's just more, I can see that the room is still a mess. What do we do? Or describe what you feel. You've just hit someone, that makes me feel very upset, or I'm worried because I'm worried someone will get hurt. Write a note is a kind of creative attack. Take action without insult. So, for example, the Lego situation, if it was more than one person, take the Lego away. You can just say, well, we're not in the right place of mind to play with Lego. We're not able to concentrate with the Lego, so I'll take it away for now. Here are some nice, they bring some nice drawings with it. I don't know if you can read. So it says, instead of, don't you dare get on that bike without a helmet, you say one word, you just say helmet. And it takes away the judgment and the anger, and it just is more like a reminder instead. Describe what you see. So I see a boy that needs a helmet. Not, why aren't you wearing a helmet? Be playful. So even putting on voices. So I tried this with Lottie and her toothbrush because she didn't want to brush her teeth for a long time. So putting on a voice with the toothbrush, I want to clean your teeth. Your teeth look so nice. Can I clean them? Or just stating the rules. Bikers must wear helmets. Or giving a little note. Find this before you ride. Love from mum. So it's in that sense more positive, more encouraging, less, angry, less judgmental. Because of course kids often don't remember, and even the kids in classrooms that are disruptive, they're not doing it spitefully most of the time. It's either because they don't know how to do the work, they're stuck, or they're struggling with something else. There's usually always a reason behind a misbehavior. The last thing, or the last bit of advice that I was given was to model what you want to see. And this, I guess, makes sense to me, but I need to be careful that this isn't the only thing I rely on. So obviously shouting, hitting, whining, swearing, if kids see this, then they will do the same thing. Like especially a 2-year-old, she picks up words, from one day to the next. If she hears swearing, she's going to start swearing. So that's obviously something to watch out for. But equally, like complaining, whining, if I model that kind of behavior, she picks up those phrases and she'll say the same kind of, oh, why do we have to do that, In a classroom, it's the same thing. If I'm a shouty teacher, then especially for the kids that have these anger issues or mental health problems, they are just going to start shouting back, and then it just gets into an argument. So instead, being more positive, more smiling, being polite, so I can tell a student off but still be respectful and still be polite to them. So never degrading them and saying you're stupid or you're wrong or you're misbehaving. I can just be more objective and say I don't like when other students are distracted. I don't like what I'm seeing. I know you have potential, but at the moment you're not showing that potential, that kind of thing. Kindness, enthusiasm. So modeling, I think, is kind of vital. It needs to go through. I wouldn't say it's the only thing you can rely on, because I'd love to rely on that and not have to deal with giving punishments and detentions, but I think in many cases you still need that. So I guess the last question then, or coming back to it, is how do you control a class or a child? Because if we go back to the initial image, that was my biggest, and still is, to be honest, my biggest nightmare, is that moment where you feel you've lost control of the class and they're just talking and they're not listening to you, and maybe they're even throwing things around and you can't stop it because they're not listening to you. That was always and has been my biggest fear. So how do you switch that so that you're in control? And I think the realization I've come to is you're not. You're never going to be in control, because these are individual personalities. Even with my 2-year-old kid, I'm not in control of her at all. She does what she wants to do. Of course, I'm there to guide her and keep her safe and all of those kind of things. But ultimately, I also don't want to control her. I don't want her to just listen to me and do everything I say. I want her to be able to make her own choices and to think for herself, and to show her free will in that sense, but in a guided way, so that she knows that I'm kind of there with her. So I'm still on this journey of figuring out how exactly to be a good teacher in terms of managing behavior, being and be a good parent, and that's constantly changing as she grows as well. I suppose some of the conclusions I've come to so far is, one, relationships are vital, and it kind of makes sense as you go through the academic year. Only towards the end do you really start being able to kind of work with a class, because they know you a bit better, you know them better, you know their circumstances, you know their mum's got a problem, their dad's in prison, you know what what buttons not to press, or where to be a bit careful, or where to be more supportive, where they need more encouragement. If they're not believing in themselves, where they need that nurturing. So in that sense, I think relationships are fundamental. Equally, being able to give the kids more autonomy and more freedom. I think the biggest success I've had this year has been setting up autonomous homeworks for my year 11s. So instead of me saying, this week you have to do this, next week you have to do this, they have to do 3 mini homeworks a week, but they get to decide what that is. I have a list of suggestions and ideas and resources that they can use, but they can pick whichever ones they want. And actually, I think it's been the first year that it's worked really well. Most of them have done some sort of 3 pieces of homework for me every week. And they're also learning then which things benefit them more and which things they're learning more from and which ones they want to do, because I'm not saying, oh, that's rubbish, you should be doing this instead. I'm giving them the freedom and autonomy. So yeah, I don't know, it's a bit of a balance. Would you change your choices? Oops. Would you change your choices from any of these ones? Where are we? I've lost all of them now. A, this one. Would you change your choice, or would you stick to the, what do we say? Most people said number 3. Pass on the task and go speak to her in private. Yeah, I think for this situation, I think that's probably the best, because then I'm not distracting anyone else. She will know that it's not acceptable, but equally I can check in and say, are you okay? Like, what's wrong today? Why are you so distracted? So I can, build that relationship rather in a judgmental, angry way. It's more, are you okay? I want to check up on you and make sure that you're all right, because I want you to be able to learn. This one, maybe neither of these are very good, because taking away the Lego from the whole class, that's not really fair on the rest of them if they're doing okay.
What about taking a Lego away just from him?
Just from him? Yeah. And give him something else to do. But I think also in this case, he would need that extra little bit of help to get started, because that's why he was playing with the Lego in the first place. This one, this is, of all the behavior situations, this is my worst nightmare, that someone's getting bullied and I can't do anything about it.
I mean, I would suggest that you start changing the word of the class
Yeah.
from stupid to another.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that's not what.
You. I mean, it has to be in you.
No, it isn't.
Which is very important.
No, that's.
Stupid group is. Oh.
No, they're not.
Consider
I don't consider them stupid.
But you said it, so I am following what you said.
No, because that's what she would think.
Okay.
That's what the girl thinks because she came down from a top set to a stupid class. That's her thought. But yeah, I suppose in that sense, this is about self-confidence. So it's more of a long-term issue that all of the students there feel more confident in their ability, or at least feel more supported in their own ability, and therefore want to support each other as well, rather than bullying each other. So that's a maybe harder, more longer-term one. But anyway, that's kind of all I've got. They're just ideas and questions that I've got and things that I'm still trying to figure out. But maybe they're useful to you, either with your kids or future kids or teaching kids, whoever. So, thank you. Yeah, if anyone's got questions. I'm not sure I've got any answers. But yeah?
So if I understood well, you organize for each week 3 suggestions of exercise that they can do at home. And how do you organize to correct the next week?
Yeah. So
because when you suggest 3 exercises, by 3
yeah.
your own work.
I see your point there. The benefit to this is none of the activities that I'm suggesting require me to mark them. So one is an online quiz. So they can do lots of questions on an online quiz and get automatic answers. So I don't need to mark that. Another is for them to make flashcards. So they make, here's a word, here's the definition. So they can then show me they've done that, or to make a mind map, or to make a video. So they're more, I suppose, creative, consolidating tasks rather than do some questions. Or if there are questions, we have like an online like a Google Classroom, so an online place where I can post questions, but then I would probably also post the mark scheme as well. So it comes also with a bit of trust that they are not just copying down the answers, but that's why there are 3 homeworks. So they can kind of cheat on one of them, but the other 2 they'll have to, like do these online quiz questions, so I can see they've also tested themselves, I can see their score. Yeah. Yeah.
I always wondered how it would work in a real teaching environment. But when I was doing my PGCE, I was being trained for older children, but we had a section dealing with behaviour, and we had this teacher who had a lot of experience. And he said something very interesting. And he said that, how do you react? What's your reaction to bad behaviour? Because that's the key point. He says if you react with aggression or surprise or anything, it's the key to make it escalate. He said the way to react is concern. If your reaction is one of concern, then usually it
diffuses it a little bit, right?
Diffuses it, and also he did it very well. He lowered his position, even physically. He would go and stand next to the table and then go down on his knee and look at his table, lowered his position. He said there's quite a lot of techniques, like I can't remember them all, but I remember those 2 in particular. But I don't know if that just works with older children, because I was dealing with sort of 15-year-olds. But I was wondering if that was what your experience was with younger children.
Yeah, I mean, even the lowering the body thing, I mean, that's just a way of diffusing aggression, or like a sideways thing, instead of me saying what you're doing is wrong. Like, that's very aggressive and threatening, and they are going to be threatened and might even stand up and start shouting back at me. Whereas, like you say, if you kind of come down to the side and be like, look, I'm a bit worried that yeah, it may, and I think for younger kids especially, because the height difference is even more pronounced, that it's Yeah, it's more important to come down to their level so they don't feel threatened. Because I think that's the difference between having an authoritarian approach where you are trying to scare them, you're trying to give them threats and make sure that they stick in line because otherwise they know what's coming, compared to you're trying to work with them and they know that you're there to support them and help them, and the only reason you're, taking their Lego gun away is because actually they can do better, and they, I suppose that gives them a much more reason to want to work with you, because they don't want to disappoint you in that sense, because you're trying to help them rather than fight with them. But,
Does it work? Have you tried it?
Does it work? It's definitely more diffusing. I try not to shout, so it doesn't come natural to me so much either, unless, as lots of teachers do, get really frazzled and tired, and it's the end of term and you've got loads of marking, and then you just lose it sometimes, which is not a good idea because they know you've lost it. So I would say shouting has never worked for me, really, but coming down and having a quiet word has, yeah. Sometimes it doesn't because they just don't care. That's the harder one, when they don't care about anything and you're trying to get them to care. That's harder. Yeah.
About excluding, does it happen? Have you, what happens to those kids who are excluded from class?
So,
Place they go, or?
yeah, there's various situations. So there's something called a managed move, where they get put into a different school and kind of swapped with another student. And it's the idea that a new environment gives them a new beginning and a new chance to try again. Sometimes that works. A lot of the time it doesn't, and they end up going back to their old school. Then there's early study leave, which is what happened to this one boy I was talking about. He got into a fight with some year 13s, but because it looks bad on the school if we exclude him, because anyway, Ofsted and people are worried about exclusions, then they just put him on early study leave, so he's at home. We're in the classroom and he's just studying at home. Studying, I doubt he's studying, but anyway. That's basically exclusion, but not legally. And then there's properly exclusion, where they might end up in a PRU, so a pupil referral unit, so kind of a school especially for excluded children. I had a friend that worked in a PRU for a while, and yeah, it's really challenging. And the statistics about what they then go on to do, so knife crime in London is blamed partly on the number of exclusions. I don't know how head teachers make these decisions, because you don't want someone like that in your school, but equally you know that their life chances once they're excluded are reduced.
But in the case of this Lego gun,
Yeah.
if you excluded that particular person
Oh, from the class?
from the class,
Yeah.
they have a place to go.
Oh yeah. That's obviously much lower level. There's another room. They go to a room that has sixth form students. I've done that a lot. But then, in that sense, the danger there is that you damage the relationship, because you're stopping them from learning. They can't learn successfully in that other room, and they feel that you've kicked them out, so they feel kind of alienated. So
the most common is like detention? Or
detention with a restorative conversation. I'm still playing with these new ideas that my schools come up with. I don't know. I feel like if they were done well, they could be really good, but I'm not sure it's there yet.
Sometimes in France, I saw during my training period that the teacher exclude from the room that the student is just
in the corridor.
Yeah. On the corridor, in the front of the door, like that the teacher can see.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have a chair or just a stand.
That's.
It's a way to make temporary exclusion.
Yeah, what we do sometimes is send them out to cool down or to calm down or to think, of what they're doing is right, and then go and have a talk with them and say, okay, what you did was wrong, da-da-da. Are you ready to come back in and learn, or do I need to send you to another room? So it's a kind of, we only use the corridor as a midway. We don't have chairs in the corridor. It's an idea, though. Yeah.
You don't want too many excluded kids in the corridor.
No, exactly, because they run around and wreak havoc too. But, yeah. Anyway, that is my alarm going off. Perfect timing. Thank you.
Very interesting, thank you.
Thank you.